Why don't people, if you have any questions, comments, or Shia,
No, I never heard it before. I love these Russian Nagunim, but I never heard that
get my CD, 39 Nigunim.
one before.
That that uh
Yes?
that rhythm, that da 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 da
Yeah.
it's repeated a lot, and so I can see the correlation you're drawing. It's very interesting. I gotta say, it's extremely interesting.
Yeah, well, it happens to be that Hasidic tunes have a lot of eye to the eyes. I can't explain to you each and every one. I would be a liar to say that, but if you pay attention, to a nigun, it's called a nigun. A Hasidic melody is called a nigun. If you pay attention, it's very helpful. And in my book, Your Better Self, I have a section called nigun or nigunin to teach you the methodology used in Chabad melody.
Interesting.
And this, by the way, is of the type of nigunim that are of happy, lively nature, right?
Sure.
There's also meditative songs. Maybe the next song, which we'll sing a little later, will be more on the meditative side, so it's slower. Not sad, but meditative and thoughtful. Yes, Aaron, you want to say something?
Yeah, I had a quick question. Now, what do you think about frequencies instead of rhythm? Now, since you've drawn so many beautiful conclusions of rhythm across the languages and religions, have you ever looked into frequencies by any chance?
I'll answer the question with a question. Please tell me what you mean by frequencies. I know what the word means,
Yeah.
and I think I know what you mean, but rather than us making an assumption,
Yeah.
why don't you tell me what you mean?
So a frequency, for example, like when something is in tune or out of tune, like you take a note, like C, a C, okay, like a C is steady. Okay, you can either take it sharp or you can take it flat or you can take it proper. Those are all different frequencies. The in tune one is at a certain frequency. When it's out of tune, you either go flat or sharp, and they resonate at different frequencies.
Uh-huh.
Have you ever drawn any correlations of frequencies, like notes, like beside?
Okay, so there is, if that's what you mean, there is, for example, what we call in music a movement. And I would say that the part of music that is movements would lend itself more to the idea that you're discussing, the frequencies.
Interesting.
And movements are kind of shorter and sharper. And this is an example of a movement. A nigun that's a movement. It's not a full Hasidic melody. Ayinai narararai 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 Ayinai narararai 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 Ay nai narai larai narararai larararai Ay nai narararai. This is known as Reb Hillel's movement. There was a student in the Chabad Yeshiva in Russia. His name was Hillel. He came from a city called Pochet. Hence they called him Hillel Pochaper. And those that he passed on at a very young age, he was a very big servant of God, and he would not allow his body to benefit from the pleasures of food and other such comforts. And he would pray with great devotion, and he used this tune, this movement, as the motivator in his yearning and longing for God. So this is a short
Mm-hmm.
movement frequency type of a experience.
Interesting.
When we were, one second please, when we were students, we were introduced to this at Morristown, the Yeshiva and the Chabad, Rabbinical College of America in Morristown, New Jersey, and it was very, very, very helpful. You know, especially when we prayed, we used it for prayer. Yes, please.
I apologize that I'm not familiar with the writings of Chabad Chasidus, even though I have a son named Menachem Mendel from my husband's side, or Alexander Hasidim way back when. But I'm really curious about this farm that teach a person how to be a mensch by the previous Rebbe, who was released, I guess, Gimel Tammuz, but if I'm saying it correctly.
Yeah.
What are those farm called? Are there English translations of them?
Yeah. You can go as easy as going on Chabad.org on the previous Rebbe, Rabbi Yoel Kahn, and look up his writings, some of which are there. But there's a book, maybe the Rabbi Karp has it here in the library, called Challenge, and there's there's two volumes, one out of England, one out of Eretz Yisrael. The Eretz Yisrael one has a red cover, the other one has a green cover. In the green cover one, there's in English a translation of a discourse based on a verse in the prophets. Nasa no Aliyas ir Ktana, when the story with the Isha, Elisha passed by, needed a place to stay. Yeah, in that book. So that would be one example of just one discourse. You hear? I wrote a book called Demystifying the Mimer. A mimer means a Hasidic discourse. And in that book, I chose discourses of the Rebbe, not his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, that are user-friendly, relevant to such issues that we're discussing. So that's my book, Demystifying the Mimer. So again, it's not based on the previous Rebbe's discourses, but what I did is I found in the Rebbe's writings similar ideas. Then there is the talks of the previous Rebbe called Likutei Diburim, and there is a translation in English of Likutei Diburim. Now, much of that are stories and history. So it's not a discourse. What I was referring to before, the discourses. So there are some translations in English of some of those discourses, but not enough. There are probably about 10, I imagine, and that's a good beginning. I remind myself now, there's a book called the Rabbi Karp, I think, knows all the Chabad English books, and online there are people teaching. I have my YouTube channel. I have a lot of clips. I teach every morning 7:45 to 8:15, and I taught a lot of those discourses. What is your first name? Ilana. I taught a lot of these discourses that I'm talking about to my students. I have a kollel online in Israel and a few students in Germany. It's anyone that wants. And we went through many of these discourses because they lend itself. These are students like yourself, some of which have never learned Chasidus, and they're online on my YouTube channel. I think I created playlists, and you could look through that. And if you don't find it, I can try. So you can listen to some of that. But again, if you want it in a book form, there are some the Likutei Diburim. There's also they translated the previous Rebbe's, Rabbi Shalom Ber Weinberg, out of Sichas in English, translated from Maimorim, the Yiddish Maimorim of the previous Rebbe. There's some there. So there's a lot of material. There's enough material to keep us busy for a while. But I do want to talk about a little bit this book in front of me, Tanya on Mental Health. I just wrote this within the last few years. I remember sitting in Miami at my my son-in-law's father's home. It was already passed on. He was a very special Jew, very special Jew. He actually grew up, I think, in Minnesota, and then he moved around to different cities for his work in transportation. And I started to, he invited me to spend a week or 10 days with him. My wife wasn't there, his wife wasn't there, so we were just two bachelors. And he loved cooking, and he was a great gourmet cook, and he made me these extensive breakfasts. And then we would take a walk along the ocean. And we went to daven together. It was a lot of close bonding. Two, our children marry each other. My daughter, who's the Rebbe's son, her husband is his son, the rabbi. Eli and Sarah Nadich. Eli and Sarah Nadich are the shluchim in Tel Aviv for all English speakers, not just Tel Aviv, but the greater area. I must say they are probably the most successful Chabad house in Israel, as far as they have hundreds and hundreds of people at their events, literally. Shabbos, they have two shuls. They have one shul they use during the week, and the other one on Shabbos, and they can have 200-300 people every Shabbos.
Wow.
And like 150 for prayer, for davening, and then another 100 for the meal. And it's so warm, and you know, they have a mixture of singles and young marrieds, and tourists and it's really, if you go to Tel Aviv, look them up, you'll really enjoy it. Anyway, so I started to write this book over there, but I didn't continue for several years, but in the last 2 years I finished it. And what I did is the Tanya, Ilana, if you've heard of the word Tanya, you've heard of the book Tanya. The Tanya was written by this rabbi. This rabbi is the founder of the Chabad movement, known as Shneir Zalman of Liadi. Okay? He's our forefather, meaning the one who started the Chabad philosophy. And Shneir Zalman of Liadi, Rabbi Shneir Zalman, has the book Tanya, which is the basic credo and the philosophy of Chabad. There's 5 sections technically, and the first one is called Likutei Amorim, which deals with a lot of psychological issues, primarily from chapters 26 through 34. What I did is I took per chapter one psychological issue, and I discuss it based on his philosophy, his thinking. So let's take here chapter 1. I gave each chapter a name. Ego is natural. So I'll talk about what ego is, that it's natural, and how to deal with it. At the end, I have a lesson usually 1 to 2 lessons per chapter, followed by an exercise. Usually 3 different. Spend 5 minutes daily thinking about what drives you. Number 2, realize that there is a purpose of having urges. There's a purpose for urges. Number 3, identify which particular negative trait drives you. In order to be healed, you need to know the problem.
Yeah.
So you won't see this type of wording necessarily in the Tanya when you read the Tanya. What is your name? Shayna. You learned Tanya, I'm sure, right?
Yes.
So if you open a Tanya, a student won't necessarily, but I've adapted it to a psychological and mental health issues. So I have, for example, anxiety, chapter 14. Chapter 16, behavior modification. Chapter 20, paradigm shift. Overcoming challenges. ADHD and ADD, chapter 40. Eliminating depression, chapter 41. Antidote for loneliness, chapter 34. 28, hypocrite, schizophrenia. So I'm not giving you, classical solutions of psychology and psychiatry, okay? I'm not a psychologist and I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a teacher of Chasidus who has not a familiarity with psychology. So this book I put together, and I think if the rabbi, somehow, he could maybe make a class or something with someone, then it would be, and you could read together and discuss it. It would be a very, very good thing for many, many people in the greater community. Orthodox, Reform, Conservative makes no difference. It's for people, You don't have to be Orthodox or Chabad to read the book and to understand it and to gain from it. So I just wanted to, tell you what this is and how important it is. And I'll tell you something. When this book came out, and people, all kinds of people, from professionals to the layperson, they grabbed it, because Tanya, mental health, everyone studies, so many people study Tanya from a religious perspective, from a Jewish perspective, but until now, no one looked at it, kind of from a mental health perspective. So that's what I'm opening up in this book.